Okay, so today's lesson in cells and systems is on the cell and its structures. So we'll talk about the animal cell, plant cell, and we are going to focus on all the organelles and the functions of those organelles. All right, so first, before we begin, we're just going to differentiate between multicellular and unicellular. So when we talk about a multicellular organism, multi meaning many, cellular meaning cell, so multicellular meaning having many cells. So a multicellular organism relies on many different specialized cells to perform the necessary functions of life. Unicellular is a single-celled organism, meaning the organism consists of only one cell. So that one cell is able to move, obtain food, and carry out all other functions essential for life. All right, so here in this chart here, we can see organisms are either unicellular or multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms have only a single cell. So some examples are amoeba, bacteria, and paramecium. Multicellular organisms, organisms that consist of many cells. Those can be plants or animals. All right, and like I said, they have specialized cells that perform necessary functions. And we'll talk about that as we go on in this unit. All right, so here we're just looking at a variety of unicellular microscopic pond organisms. So again, a single-celled organism can do most things that we, multicellular organisms, we need trillions of cells to do. They're able to eat, move, react to stimuli, get rid of the waste products, and reproduce. So these are just some examples here. We have the Chlamydomonas, the Euglena, a paramecium here, Stentor, the diatoms, and Volvox. All right, so we're going to start focusing on cell parts next, and we're going to start looking at organelles inside of cells. So organelles, these are structures within a cell, and they have specific functions. So they're like mini organs inside of a cell. So here is a cell. This is an animal cell, and notice the inside of this cell is filled with many different structures. So those are called the organelles. So we're going to take a look at each of those organelles now separately, as well as their functions. All right, so firstly, we have this structure. It's called the cell membrane. So it goes around the cell like so, and that is important because it surrounds and protects the content of the cell. So if you think about us humans and our skin, it's pretty similar to the skin that covers our body. So this cell membrane, it is permeable. It controls what goes in and out of the cell. All right, so it's permeable, but not to everything. So it lets needed materials in, and it lets waste materials out. Next is the nucleus. So here again we have a cell, and within the cell we have this structure here called the nucleus. And the nucleus is considered the command center. It directs all cellular activities such as movement, growth, and other life functions. So think of it like the brain. The brain would also be considered like the command center. It also contains chromosomes, however. So chromosomes we would find here in the cell's nucleus, and chromosomes are where DNA is found. So these chromosomes are structures that are made of DNA, that's our genetic material, and that is what directs a cell's growth and reproduction. The nucleus also has a membrane surrounding it. So this nucleus would also have a membrane called a nuclear membrane, and it would also control what enters and leaves the nucleus. So that nuclear membrane is also permeable, but selectively permeable. Okay, next is the cytoplasm in the cell. And it's this jelly-like substance inside of cells, and it supports all the organelles inside the cell. So this purple area shown inside of here, all that purple area would be the cytoplasm. Right here in the middle here would be the nucleus. So the cytoplasm also contains the nutrients and oxygen that is required by the cell, and it is constantly moving. So it is jelly-like, it is moving, and that movement allows distribution of oxygen and nutrients to different parts of the cell. So it's similar to blood flowing throughout the body. All right, next we have the mitochondria, and this is where energy is produced. So one way to remember it is it's the mitochondria because it's the powerhouse of the cell. So inside the mitochondria is where tiny food particles are broken down to release their chemical energy for the cell's activities. So some cells, like the muscle cells, will have more mitochondria within them than other cells because they need more energy to function. All right, and I just want to go back to the beginning here, the first diagram here. So when we look at this diagram here, you can see this animal cell, there's a mitochondria in here as well as here, and here's the nucleus that we've also talked about. All right, the next structure we're going to talk about is the vacuoles. And these are the balloon-like storage places for things like surplus food, nutrients, water, as well as wastes or other substances that the cell cannot use right away. So in this cell, we can see a vacuole right here. And again, this is an animal cell. So animal cells, they have many small vacuoles. So we can see another vacuole right here. Next, we're going to look at the plant cell. All right, so here we're looking at a plant cell diagram. So first of all, notice the shape. It's much more like a rigid shape, more boxy, like rectangular shaped. But notice in this diagram, we still see a nucleus like we did before. There's still the cytoplasm present. And we still see the mitochondria, which was the powerhouse of the cell. And there's still a cell membrane as well, which controls what goes in and out of the cell. But we will see other things here in the plant cell that animal cells don't have. So one thing we see here is the chloroplast. Another is the cell wall. And another difference we'll see is this very large vacuole. All right, so those are the three main differences that we will see between the plant cell and the animal cell. So a plant cell, it has all the same organelles as an animal cell, except for the following. So number one is that cell wall we saw. Number two were those chloroplasts, and number three is that large vacuole. So let's talk about the cell wall first. So again, only plant cells will have cell wall, or some fungi will have cell walls, and some unicellular organisms. All right, so keep that in mind. That's one big difference between plant cells and animal cells. So this cell wall is much thicker and more rigid than the cell membrane. It's made of a tough material called cellulose, and it's there as a support structure for the cell. Now, plant cells will still have a cell membrane as well. So the outer layer is the cell wall, and then that inner layer here is the cell membrane. Next is the chloroplasts that we saw in the plant cell. So the chloroplasts are where photosynthesis occurs. So they're folded membranes inside each chloroplast, and they contain the green pigment called chlorophyll. And it's that green pigment that absorbs sunlight. All right, so we have the chloroplast. Within the chloroplast, we have chlorophyll. That's the green pigment that will absorb sunlight for photosynthesis to occur. All right, and next we're going to talk about that large vacuole that we saw in the plant cell. So reminder that when we were looking at the animal cell, they were like smaller structures in the animal cell. So here we can see 3 small vacuoles. In the plant cell, it is a much larger vacuole and usually just the one large vacuole. All right, so plant cells have the large vacuole, usually just the one big vacuole. It's the storage room for nutrients, water, and other substances, and it also keeps the plant rigid. All right, it prevents it from wilting. So when you water a plant, it's the vacuole that's going to take up all that water by osmosis. When a plant wilts, it's because this vacuole has lost its water. All right, so this vacuole, when it's filled with water, it helps the plant to maintain turgor pressure, and that's what helps the plant maintain an upright position. All right, it also, once it's filled, it pushes the cell contents closer to the cell surface here, and that's especially important for chloroplasts because it makes sure that the chloroplasts are getting closer to the edge of the cell, therefore closer to absorbing more sunlight. All right, so in the animal cell, we see the several small vacuoles used for storage. They can contain nutrients, water, or waste. And here in the plant cell, we see one large vacuole. It's used to store water, which pushes against the cell wall, and it also keeps the plant rigid. All right, so just to reiterate, the plant cell, it still has the same organelles as we saw in the animal cell. So it still contains the nucleus, it still contains the cell membrane, it still contains mitochondria, it also still contains the cytoplasm. All right, these are just the extra structures that we see in the plant cell, which were the cell wall, the chloroplast, and that large vacuole. All right, so next just looking at cell size and function. Why are cells so small? Why aren't they just one large organism? Like, why are we made of so many cells? Why aren't we just one large cell? So what we have to think about here is that the cells, they need a constant supply of materials like oxygen, water, and food particles. And the cells also need to be able to get rid of the waste products. So a larger cell would need more materials and would produce more waste. All right, so just keep in mind that there's only one way materials get in and out of the cell. It's through the cell membrane. So multicellular organisms, instead of becoming one large cell, we add on more cells. So cells come in a variety of shapes and sizes, but most cells, they fall into a narrow range of size. So that's the size that they're going to function the most efficiently. To grow bigger, organisms are going to add more cells to their bodies rather than growing bigger cells. Okay, and that occurs during cell division. Plant and animal cells, they usually have a diameter between 10 to 50 micrometers. Bacterial cells are even smaller, and they have a diameter between 1 to 5 micrometers. So if we look at here in just comparison, here is a plant cell compared to an animal cell, and then compared to a bacterial cell. All right, so next I have a couple of videos to show, so I'm just going to pause here.